All right, so now we have every single one of the different groups that's been done. So I aggregated it to the Chicago crime census blocks, the census groups, the census tracts, and the counties. And so you'll notice in each of these cases that there's a higher level of spatial disaggregation. So basically there's more places in each of these. So the county, there's really only one. I mean, there's three that have data, but there's one main one. And then you go up to the census tracts, the census blocks, block groups, and then the census blocks. Now, with this is where making decisions about your symbology is going to be very, very important, because this is going to change what your story is around the crimes in Chicago. So if I'm just looking at the crimes in Chicago from the county level, basically there's just this one. And so this, I mean, we have the three, but basically all of the data is in this one county. And so that's just one value to describe the entire city. And this is oftentimes how various different statistics are done, where it's, well, this city has this. So Chicago has a high crime rate. If we get down to the block level, one of the things that you'll notice is that, well, this has a very high level of spatial disaggregation, right? So if I zoom into any one of these areas, you'll notice that, yeah, there are some ones that have really high values, right? You have a couple of them that have high values, like over here, and then you have a whole bunch of ones that have very low values, right? So this is a spatial disaggregation here. Now, when I'm zoomed out, though, one of the things is that with the current symbology, particularly with the fact I have borders, I can't really see any of this data because it's so fine-grained compared to how far away I'm looking at it. And so this is where we really need to start taking a look at how do we want to symbolize things and at what level do we want to symbolize them, right? So for the symbology here, I can just click through them and start seeing what level I like. What level is going to start telling the story that I might be interested in, right? And so in my case, looking at the Chicago crime county data, I'm not interested in this. This has too much generalization attached to it. I don't want this. So I'm not going to use that. Any of the other three, I could potentially use, right? It's just going to be, how careful am I in building what I want my story to be and what my symbology is. So one of the things with the census block data that's incredibly important is that you get rid of these borders. That is the only way this is going to be a functional data set to be able to see, because as it is right now, there is nothing we're seeing in this map. So to get into the symbology, what I can do is I can right click on my layer and then I can head down to the symbology. This symbology tab is going to pop up on your right hand side, and this is where you can start playing with all of the different options that you have. So the first option that you'll have is this graduated color one. Because of doing the aggregate by points, it automatically put this to a graduated color. I can switch this. Most things when you add them in are done as a single symbol. You can do them as unique values, and so on and so on and so on. In this particular case, graduated colors is going to be perfectly fine because I have a high to low set of data that I want to show in this map. But if I wanted to just show where Chicago was, I could just put this to a single symbol and just show where Chicago is. So I'm going to keep it like this for now. I'm not going to touch anything on the methods or the classes right now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing around with what I want my color scheme to be. Now, your color scheme is going to be important because each one of these has a different sort of association with it. So blue oftentimes is more of a relaxing color. Red is oftentimes this danger. This green is, positive or nature, right? We've heard of greenwashing. That's where that one kind of falls. So, but I can play around and see what I think is going to be the best option for my colors. So I can choose one of these. I'm going to choose this orange one for now. It's fairly close to what it was before, but it just pops up over here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over here and I can take a look and I can say, okay, apply to fill, apply to outline, apply to fill, and outline. So as I click through these there's going to be things that happen, right? And so it's going to be trying to adjust what your symbol is actually going to be doing. Now, you'll notice that it doesn't really change a lot because, again, the borders in this case are actually kind of getting in the way. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to head over into More, and I'm going to format all symbols. This is where I can get rid of my borders. And so if I do that, it's going to automatically pop up as a gallery. I don't want that if I have the graduated colors already, because this is going to change all of them to the same thing, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to go over into properties, and this is where it's going to pop up. Now, in the color, you'll see this line through it. That's because each one already has a different one, so you're not really going to be messing with that. The thing I do want to do in this case, though, is I want to drop that outline width down to 0 so that there is no outline anymore. This is going to let me see through those outlines into whether or not this data set is something that's going to be useful or not. Right? So you can see that we have now all of these different blocks. We have the different oranges coming around. So this one's not too bad. It doesn't look great, though, with this world imagery map underneath it, because it starts to detract from what the actual map is. And so instead, I can just turn that off, and now all of a sudden we have a much more palatable map, even though, yes, I'm aware that it is all white, but at least we have some sort of thing attached to it that is at least a little easy to read and look at. Now, if I want to fill in the background so that I can show where all of the different potential options are, I can go, and in the bottom here, there was the original set of census data that we had. And so I can go in here and I can say, all right, well, I want to use this as a background just to orient myself against that. And so I can go here, I can click on the census block groups, and you'll notice that this single symbol pops up. If I click on this symbol, the exact same set of properties is going to pop up here. And so then I can play around with this color and this border so that I can show how this background looks. All right, so here is it in this case. Now, in this case, I don't love how this looks, and so I don't love how the census block look in this case. So what I might do instead is I might go over to a different one, and instead of trying to do a background, I might just want to have the borders, but I'm able to see through them. Typically speaking, I'm going to want to do this at a larger data set, right? So something that's already more spatially aggregated. So something that's going to orient me, but without having all of those tiny little lines. So in this case, I'm going to choose the census tract data for this. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put this to no color so that I can see through it. I'm going to drop this border size down to the smallest one possible, which is 0.4. If you get below 0.4, you will not be able to see the lines. And then I'm going to switch this out for some sort of black just to see how it looks. And then I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to make sure that this is checked on so I can see through it. Now, this orients me fairly well, but the black is very distracting. So I can do one of two things. I can either lighten the color of it, or I can change the transparency of it so that I can see through more of it. In this case, I'm going to change that transparency. I'm going to start bumping it up. We're going to see what happens with 60. With 60, it drops it down. It lets me orient, but it's not really stealing that attention away. I think I even want to drop that more. There we go. We got something like this. So this then just subtly orients me so that I can see these different blocks. It's at 80% transparency, so it's very light, but it then lets me orient around and see where this is in a way that's a little bit more functional, a little bit more neighborhood oriented than the individual block level. That's just using the base. In this case, the base natural breaks that are attached to it. I can start messing around with those if I want and start seeing what happens if I change them. So if I click back on my census block one, the one that has the orange in it, where we have the counts, I can start messing around with the number of classes I have. Just be careful when you go too high. If you go too high, we're not able to see the difference. And so maybe I want to do it as 7. And so we've got now 7. It automatically changed it into these lines, which I don't love, so I'm going to drop that one back down to 5. I'm going to drop that one back down to 5. And I'm going to switch this symbol back. Or I'm going to format all symbols. I am going I've now switched it back. So now I'm gonna go through and click on a different one here. There we go. So we've managed to get it back. So this flipped it back from its striping to now its full color again. So I can start messing around with the number of breaks. I can increase those, decrease those, or I can also start looking at how those breaks are being divided up. So I can switch it to quantile. This makes everything a lot darker, right? This is because of how it's breaking up the data. I could go geometric, see what that does. Geometric is going to put a lot of things in this middle category. I can do standard deviation, right? And now it's flipped it back to this 3. I don't love what's happening there. And so I can just go through and start playing around and seeing what is going to be the most effective way to communicate what I'm interested in doing. So play around with each of those, see what is going to be the thing that's most of interest, play with the different types of color schemes that are bad and the ones that are good, and take a look and see like what are the things that are going to make your data the most accessible possible to tell the story that you want to tell. And so once you're happy with it, please not this, then you can save it, take a screenshot of it, and then move on to the next one. But all of the different Symbology things are in the Symbology tab, and so you can play around with each of those. And then if you do want that transparency, it's up in this feature layer ribbon, and it's going to act on whichever one of these you want. So I could even put this out. It's going to dull out all of those different colors, turn everything a little bit darker, and you can see that it feeds a little bit better onto this underlying map if you want to keep it. So those are some things to play with Symbology and some things to think about. I will see you back here soon.